far, in your house or in your car, wherever you are on it, I pray for you. I pray for you. It's so funny because it's true, isn't it? That's not going to be the message you're going to hear today at church, but you know, there's something in all of us that when we are hurt, we want the other person to feel our pain. And it's a natural desire. And it's something we all carry with us. And again, that song is funny because it's a true song. You know, we want the other person to feel what we have felt. You know, when somebody raises their voice, we want to raise our voice louder. When somebody pushes us, we want to push back at them. When somebody hurts us, we want them to hurt as well. Maybe you're sitting here today, and when you think of that song, you know, certain faces pop up in your mind. You know, maybe you think of your ex-husband, and you pray that he has some kind of tragedy in his life where he will be just miserably unhappy in his marriage with his new wife. Or maybe you just hope that other creep in the office that embarrassed you this last week would get their comeuppance, and that maybe they would be fired because of their foolishness. But there's something in all of us that holds on to that opportunity to try to get back and to give back to somebody. But here's the problem. We've been talking this whole start of the year about this idea of finding hope in a dark world. And one of the key things we have talked over and over again about is our past. And how our past is always with us unless we're willing to let go of that. And for a lot of us, that idea of letting go, of forgiving, is just someplace we really don't want to go. But here's the problem. We want to see them hurt the same way they hurt us. There's something in all of us that's wired that way. But bitterness contaminates everything. It does. It spreads far and wide and deep. And you may be sitting there, and if we were having a conversation, you might say, well, Mike, you know, I've forgiven that. I've forgotten all that stuff. I've forgiven it. And it's so far away. In reality, you may just have simply pushed it so far back because you don't ever want it to come up again. But there are moments when it sort of cracks open, and there it is again, and you feel those feelings again. Feelings of, man, if I could just let them feel like I feel. And so today we're going to talk about this idea of forgiveness. I love how Lewis Smedes, a theologian, writes this. He says, our hate does not even have the decency to die when those we hate die. For it is a parasite sucking our blood, not theirs. And it's that last part that we need to recognize. We think it's all about them and getting back at them. It's really about what it does to us. What it eats away at us. How it affects our relationships. Because if you have been hurt in the past, and I'm guessing that all of us have been hurt some way, and some of us more deeply than others, when we've been betrayed, when we trusted somebody and they have turned that around and taken that away from us, there is something in all of us that is afraid to go that step farther with somebody else. I'm not sure I can trust you because of that pain. I'm not sure I can believe you because of that stuff. And as long as that past in your life is not forgiven, it will keep coming back again and again and again and again. Here's the fourth choice of today. We've been looking at 4 choices. We've gone all these. Here's the choice I want to encourage you to think about making today. Choose to free people rather than hurt people. Choose to free them instead of hurting them. Everybody say that with me. Free them instead of... Easy to say, isn't it? And you probably maybe think that right now. Mike, that's easy for you to say, even to kind of throw out there, but you have no idea. But I'll tell you, I have an idea, and so does everybody else in this room have an idea. of what it means, what that potentially means to say, I'm going to forgive. I'm going to take my hands off and let go. And because we all understand that, it's the reason we all understand why we need the idea of forgiveness, why we love the idea of forgiveness coming this way, but not always so good with it going the other way. And each week we've been looking at kind of a person from the Bible, from this great history of life. And today we're going to look at a story from Jesus. And when Jesus wants to teach a point, one of these life-altering, life-changing points, he oftentimes tells a story. So we're going to look at one of his stories today. But before we go any farther, I want to invite you just to bow your heads and let's pray one more time together, all right? Lord, you know us even better than we know ourselves. But we know ourselves well enough to know that there are things that we have held on to much too long. That there are things that are affecting our lives even today that happened months ago, maybe even years ago. And we know we want to be free from it. We want to be free from that pain and from the memories. But we're afraid. Because we're afraid of what letting go would mean. What we think it'll communicate. We're afraid of what might happen. But we all sit in this room here today, or in our homes listening, knowing that we love the idea of forgiveness for us, and we're thankful that you have sent your son Jesus to die in our place to forgive us. And we sit here today forgiving people whether we have chosen to accept that or not. But we also know that this forgiveness isn't just a one-way thing. And it's the thing at times that makes us just not sure what to do. So, Father, today I simply ask you to do what we just sang about a few minutes ago. That you would be the healer and the mover and the empowerer for our lives. That what we have thought is impossible to do can become possible through you. And I pray you'd help us to be convinced of that enough today to respond to it. In your name, amen. So Jesus tells this story, and if you want to find it, follow along in a Bible. It's over in Matthew chapter 18. And here's the setting. Jesus has been talking about forgiveness, and his disciples have kind of said, well, what does forgiveness really look like? I mean, where's the limit on forgiveness? And it's a question we all would have, right? How much forgiveness is enough? How many times do I have to say, Joel, you've forgiven? Okay, you've done it again and forgiven again. At what point do I have to say, knock it off, Joel, it's enough. I'm not forgiving you any longer, right? And so Jesus has listened to Peter ask this question, and Peter kind of said, hey, I got an idea. How about, 7? That's a lot of times. And Jesus says, let me just tell you the story. And here's how he begins. The kingdom of heaven, and Jesus oftentimes tells these stories when he says, this is what life ought to look like for those that are my followers. This is what the kingdom of heaven here on earth ought to look like in your life and in my life. The kingdom of heaven is like a king who wanted to settle accounts with his servants. Kingdom of heaven is like this king who says, hey, we're going to get all these things right. I got these outstanding debts. I got some bills owed. I got some stuff I got to pay. Let's get everything settled. And as he began the settlement, a man who owed him 10,000 talents was brought to him. Now, most of us have no idea how much a talent is, right? We think of a talent as somebody who has, some ability you have. Back then, a talent was a set amount of money. Now, but even if we don't know what it is, we know 10,000 of anything is a lot, right? Even 10,000 pennies is a lot of pennies, right? I mean, it's still a lot. And here's the thing. Since he was not able to pay the debt, the master ordered that he and his wife and his children and all that he had be sold to repay the debt. Now, put yourself in this guy's place for a moment. You think about the embarrassment. You think about the intimidation. You think about the fear that he faces at this moment. Not only has he messed up, it's going to cost not just him, it is going to cost his wife, It's going to cost his kids. It's going to cost him everything that he has because of what he's done. 10,000 talents was a massive debt. I think it's at the bottom of that outline you have. A talent is equal to 20 years of work. So some of you in this room have made a talent in your life. Some of you made a couple of talents in your life. Some of you are just barely working on a little bit of a talent. Talent is worth 20. Thus, his debt is 200,000 years of work. This is a massive debt. This is bigger than, trillions or gazillions or I have no idea what the next one after. Anybody know what the next one after a gazillions is? It's a lot of money, right? It's a massive debt. What this means is when the king says, you got to go to jail, or I'm going to put you into slavery, you, your wife, your kids, and by the way, it's going to be your grandkids, and your great-grandkids, and your great-grandkids, and your great-great, you do not 200,000 years of greats that are going to be impoverished in slavery because of what you did. And I love what the guy says. The servant falls on his knees before him and says these great words, "Be patient with me." Jesus' hearers that day would have chuckled at that moment. Because you got this massive debt, right? Be patient with me. It's 200,000 years of labor. It can't be that bad. Right? Be patient with me, and I will pay you back everything. It's funny, folks. I mean, you got to give the guy some credit for his spunk, but it's funny, right? I mean, if somebody owes you, $300 gazillion, and they say, "Be patient with me," you're going to say, "Yeah, that's right. Yeah, right. I mean, there's no way this is going to happen. And here's the amazing thing. Here's the twist, and Jesus' stories always have a twist. The servant's master took pity on him, canceled the debt, and let him go. To which I have to figure somebody in the crowd kind of elbows his buddy and says, "There's the kind of guy I'd like to work for, right? Where can I sign me up for some of that? I can get this huge debt," and he cancels it all away. It's not like winning the lottery, your mind begins to go, what you would do with this whole freedom and stuff. But we know when Jesus tells a story, he's not just telling a story about debts or even forgiveness. He's really telling a story about us. And the fact that all of us sitting in this room today have a massive debt before a holy God. And it's a debt that we have not only earned, we continue to pile up parts of it. That debt keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. I mean, every time that you're jealous, every time that song will go through your mind now and you think, yeah, I wish, pray for you that this is going to happen. Every time we're judgmental, every time that, something comes out of our mouth and we regret it, even when something comes out of our mouth and we don't regret it, but we should regret it, and when that thought goes through our mind, every time those things happen, it adds to our debt. And Jesus will say, we can say all we want, that, be patient with me, I'm going to earn it back, but it's not going to happen. And just like this master had pity on his servant and canceled the debt, let him go, that's the exact thing that God does for each of us. That he has canceled that debt. That he has let us go from it. That we're free from all that. When the owner forgives the debt doesn't just disappear. And this is important for us. Because we kind of think sometimes, I've sinned, I ask for God to forgiveness, he kind of rips up the paper, burns it, trashes it, shreds it, whatever happens in heaven, deletes the record, and it's just gone. It's just a business transaction. But this guy got him in debt. 200,000 years worth of labor. This wasn't just money on paper, this was stuff that was out, and now somebody has to carry that. Somebody has to repay that debt. The owner personally absorbs it. It takes the loss himself. See, this isn't a matter of just saying, "Oh, you're forgiven, don't worry about it." This is, I'm going to take care of it, and I'm going to bear the cost. It's the exact thing that God has done for us. Now, in all of Jesus' stories, there's a twist, and that's the twist, but there's a second twist. Because everybody's wondering, what's the servant going to do? Because the story goes on. It says, when the servant went out, he found one of his fellow servants who owed him 100 denarii. This debt equals about 100 days worth of work, about 4 months. So we have, this guy owes him 4 months worth of work. He owed the king 200,000 years of labor. So what would you expect this guy to do? Forgive him, right? I mean, it's a little bit of debt, but it's enough, but it's not that big of a deal. And Jesus says, he grabs the guy, begins to choke him, and he says, pay back what you owe me. Which everybody's kind of shocked because this guy just got forgiven this huge amount. And his fellow servant falls to his knees and begs him and says, sounds very familiar, be patient with me, and I will pay you back, right? Now, the reality is, this one has likelihood that he might be able to pay it back, right? I mean, if they say 4 months of salary, if you had to find 4 months of your salary to give it to somebody, that'd be a little bit of a stretch for you, but you could, over time, pay it back. 200,000 years, not so much. But he refused. He refused. Instead, he went off and had the man thrown into prison until he could pay the debt. And everybody who heard that story then thought, what a jerk. Or some other terminology. But how could the guy miss that? How could he not get that? How could he not understand that when you've been forgiven that much, forgiveness ought to flow from you? And I don't know what the guy does. You don't know whether he grabs the guy and looks at him and says, you're going to pay me this back because you're part of the problem. You're part of the problem that got me in that situation in the first place. Even though I'm forgiven, you're part of the problem. Maybe that's why he wants it back. Or maybe he looks at him and says, it's my chance to get ahead now. I've been free, but now I got my chance to get a little bit ahead of the game. But ultimately, when he looks at this guy, what he's saying is, I'm going to make you pay. Because you owe me, and now you got to pay. Isn't that what we all oftentimes do? We want our revenge. We want somebody to suffer something because of what they did for us. We want them to pay. We want them to feel the exact same thing that we felt when they did us wrong. The reality is, you don't forgive someone for their sake. You do it for your own freedom. I want you to think about that for a moment. So often when I think I'm going to forgive you, I'm forgiving you for your sake. Forgiveness has not anything to do with that other person as much as it has to do with you. I think I wrote there at the bottom of your outline. In the Greek, the word forgiving here means to take your hands off. And we're afraid that if I take my hands off of this, what it's going to communicate. If I let them get away with this, they're going to think it's okay. They might go do to somebody else if we're trying to be real sort of ethical there. Real forgiveness is never cheap. And it always costs us. Because we're the ones taking our hands out. We're the ones that are going to have to let things go. But here's the reality. Forgiveness costs you something, and it's never cheap. But unforgiveness costs you something as well. Some of you should have bought stock in Pepto-Bismol years ago from the results of not being able to forgive. And you know it. You can blame it on the stress, you can blame it on this, that, but you know that it's that thing that just kind of keeps dragging around, hanging on, keeps trying to pull you back to things. And when I talk to people who really want to experience forgiveness, really want to experience giving forgiveness and receiving it, there tends to be 3 hurdles that people have a hard time when you think about forgiveness. And here they are. First one is the idea that forgiving is the same as condoning. If I forgive somebody, I'm really kind of condoning what they did. I want you to write this down. Forgiveness is not condoning. It's not excusing something. In fact, you can't forgive something that hasn't required you to have a cost to it. See, the fact that forgiveness is needed and granted indicates that what someone did was wrong and inexcusable. I had a friend of mine call me this last week, and I hadn't heard him for quite a while, and he said, "Hey, Mike, how you doing?" I said, "Fine." We chatted a little bit, and I said, "What's up?" And he said, "Well, I'm calling." He said, I finally come to the realization that I'm an alcoholic. And been going to AA, and I've recognized just the cost that it's done to my life, drinking. And he said, so I'm working this thing, and I'm at the step of making amends. It's one of the steps in the 12 steps of AA. And he said, so I'm calling you to make amends. I'm asking you to forgive me. And he kind of went down a list of stuff. And I said, oh, don't worry about it. Most of the stuff he had done wasn't directed at me. It was other kind of stuff. I just kind of watched him do this stuff. And he went down through a whole list. I've been deceitful and lied to you and put you in bad positions and all this kind of stuff. And I kind of just said no, because I didn't really feel that he really owed me anything. By the way, I was handling it totally wrong. Thankfully, before I got off the phone with him, I recognized I needed to save this for him, because this wasn't about me and how I felt about it. It was about how he felt about it. So finally I said, I forgive you. As opposed to just saying, don't worry about it, it's not a big deal. Because what he needed wasn't just for me to condone it or kind of excuse it more than condone. What he needed to know that somebody was forgiving him for owning up the stuff that he needed to own up to. And sometimes we think, I don't want to forgive somebody because it might appear to be condoning it, when in reality, when you forgive somebody, it's not condoning or excusing it. It's saying, you're owning up, and I'm owning up as well. And I'm taking my hands off it. There's a second hurdle. That's the idea that forgiving means you always reconcile with the person. If I forgive you, then we're going to be best buddies, and everything's going to be great. Stella does something, we yell and scream at each other, and I say, oh, we forgive each other, and now we're just going to be happy like nothing ever happened. Everything's going to be great. Forgiveness is not reconciling. We need to know that. Because you can't reconcile with somebody. Sometimes you say, I forgive you, and somebody says, what are you forgiving me for? I didn't do anything wrong. You can't have a meeting of the hearts if you don't have a meeting of the minds. You can't establish a relationship without some truth and some trust and have a safe relationship. I love this text over in Romans 12. Paul writes these words, if it is possible, as far as depends on you, live at peace with everyone. I love it because it's a very honest statement. It doesn't say, live at peace with everyone, period. That's your job as a Christian. Live at peace, period. Paul says, listen. Much it has to do with you, try to live at peace. If it's possible. But those 4 words tell us that sometimes it is. And so forgiveness is not always reconciling, but forgiveness is still forgiveness. Here's the third hurdle. The idea to forgive means I have to forget. Forgiveness is not forgetting. See, sometimes we think the thought comes back in, I thought I already forgiven that person, now I remember it, so I haven't forgotten it, so it means I haven't forgiven it. I want you to banish that from your mind, if you can forget that. See, forgetting is a very passive thing. You can't force yourself to forget something. You ever try to forget anything? I'm going to forget that, I'm going to forget that. Well, the whole time you're doing is remembering it, right? It's a passive thing. It happens over the course of time. It happens over as things go on. You begin to think about it less and less. Forgiving is a very aggressive thing. It's an action thing. It's a thing that we do. See, we need to forgive precisely because we have not forgotten. Let me say that one more time. I'll try this side. We need to forgive precisely because we have not forgotten. Okay. Thought it was a better point than that, but all right. How many of you heard this statement before? Hurt people hurt people. A few of you. If you haven't heard it before, it's a great statement. It's kind of sort of a cliche. Hurt people, but the reality is, behind all cliches, there's a certain amount of truth. And that statement has helped me in a lot of situations. See, my job can be the best job. It can be a pretty tough job. And I've always told people the best part of my job is people. You know what the worst part of my job is? Yeah, see, you already knew this, right? Yeah. Sometimes people come up, you're the pastor, you get paid to listen to all my junk, and so I beep, 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 back up the truck, dump the load on you. I got to go away because And my job is to simply sit there and enjoy the stuff. And this statement has helped me with so many different things. Because when people are hurt, they tend to hurt other people. Because that's how they feel. And they want somebody else to experience their pain. They want somebody else to know what they're experiencing. So the way they do that is by hurting you, lets them feel, at least in their mind, that you're going to experience it. But while hurt people, free people. And that is exactly why Jesus told this little story. Because if you go back, I didn't finish the story, but the story kind of ends up by saying, some other servants see what this servant does, and go back and tell the big boss. The big boss goes, oh, no, you didn't. Takes him and his family, and throws them all in jail. Not a great ending, not that happy kind of ending. But it reminds us again that what God is after is for us to experience forgiveness from Him in the kind of way that literally changes our life. Changes how we see things, how we talk, how we process things. And the reality is, forgiveness is me giving up the right to hurt you for hurting me. That's what forgiveness is. Because I'm going to tell you, not always, but a lot of the time, you are totally justified in being mad at somebody and wanting revenge. Because people can do terrible things to other people. And there's something that I think we're wired to kind of step up to that and not feel good about that. So it really is about me giving up my right to hurt you because you hurt me. I love Booker T. Washington's statement. You can't hold a man down without staying down with him. Is that right? And that's important to know. And forgiveness allows you to get up off of him and lets him get up as well. Because free people really need to free people. Listen, it costs a lot to forgive. But to not forgive costs you more. And I want you to know that I don't want you to have to continue to experience the pain of that thing or that person any longer. Because by holding on to it, you keep the hurt right here. Keep it close to you. Take your hands off it. You're not just freeing them. You're really freeing yourself. See, the power to forgive lies in the experience of being forgiven. That's what happens to this servant. He has within his hands the power to forgive. He's experienced it, but the question of the whole story is, what's he going to do with that power? Does he use that power to let it sink into his life? Or does he use that power to now try to get ahead and make the other guys pay for everything? Over in Ephesians chapter 4, Paul simply says, listen, stop being bitter and angry and mad at others. For some of those, that might be a little statement you want to put on your dashboard of your car. And it's not so much a command as I believe it's an appeal. Come on, stop being bitter and angry and mad at others. And I think if there's a parenthesis there, I mean, what's it getting you? What is it really getting in your life? Instead, be kind and merciful. And then he makes this unbelievable statement. Forgive others just as God forgave you because of Christ. It's one of those things that, oh man, why did they have to put that in the Bible, right? Why are we asked to forgive just like God forgave us? Not just to forgive in general, but to forgive others, because God knows, just like we know, that the things we need to forgive aren't situations, it's people that are tied to those situations. And to do it just like God did for us. When he stepped in and said, not only am I erasing this debt, I am taking this debt on me and paying for it myself. And I believe that understanding God forgives me despite me enables me to forgive others despite others. That one I really like, so let's say it out loud together, all right? Understanding God forgives me, enables me, despite. Thank you. My question is, do you want to be free from that power today? Do you want to say, God, I know I can't do this, and I really don't want to do this in one sense. But in another sense, I really do want to do it. Because I want to experience forgiveness. And I want to experience freedom. Not just this way, but this way as well. Because when we do that, it allows your past to really become just that. Your past. My final appeal today is simply this. Don't let yesterday use up too much of today. Because for a lot of us, that's what happens. It keeps coming back around again and again, and it keeps using up today. And God has given us today, and He'll give us tomorrow maybe, and maybe the next day. But today's what we have. It doesn't make sense to use up today thinking about those past things and having all those things kind of pull us back. We are never so free as when we reach back into our past and forgive a person who caused us pain. So let me ask you a question here. Who is it that you need to forgive? Do you have a picture in your mind? Have a person in mind. What if today is the day that you can be free from them and free from all of that stuff that goes along with them? What if what God said is really true? That you can experience not only forgiveness, but that you can experience the freedom that comes in taking your hands off and no longer saying, I'm going to make them pay back, I'm going to make them hurt because they hurt me, but I'm going to forgive them. Not for their sakes, but for my own. Anybody ready to take that step today? If you are, I want to invite you to stand up right at this moment. And don't stand up because somebody else next to you is standing up. Because God knows our heart. And because He knows our heart, He also knows what a faith statement does for us. So with us standing or sitting, which is fine, just invite us to pray for one moment. Let's close our eyes. Father, we stand because we know we have to be free. We have to let go. And we have to give you space. So we just ask you now to do that for us. That as we let go, that you would step in and to bring the healing to us and to them that you want. We're thankful again to turn towards you and experience forgiveness and freedom in your name. Amen.